Hi everyone, welcome to the CodeQueryHub. So in the previous video, we have learned about the data types in Python. So we have discussed that the basic Python supports 4 data types, that is int, float, string and boolean. Now in this video, let's learn about the conversion functions in Python. So like we are having 4 data types, we are also having 4 conversion functions and they are also having the same name as the data types. So let me write it as there are 4 conversion functions of the same name as data type. Now let me write the function as int, float, string, and boolean. Now, if you remember how to define a function, so the syntax for that is you have to write the function name and then include the parenthesis after that. So let's include the round brackets or the parenthesis. So yeah, these are your conversion function. Now let's see the use cases. So let's take an example. Suppose you want to convert float value to integer value. Then how to do it? So let's take an example and let me take a variable A. It is holding some float value. So yeah, we can see that this variable A is holding this decimal place value. Now, if you want to convert this value into integer value, then you have to use the integer function and give the variable name. So yeah, you can see that it is showing the integer value of A. But if you check the value of A, it is still a decimal value. It means it is not converting this value. It is just taking the integer value and reflecting the output. So what if you want to store this value? Let's see. So you can, if you want to reassign the integer value to the original value A, then first convert it into integer value and then reassign the value into A. And now if you see, then you can see that you are having this value of A as 78. In this way, you can convert and store the value as integer value. Now, let's see the second case. That is, you want to convert integer value to float value. And let's do one thing before that. Now, suppose if you don't want to change the value of A, but you want to store this integer value somewhere, then you can do it. Let me write it as, let's rerun it. And instead of storing in A, let's store it into another variable B. And now if you run this value of A is still the same. And let's, yeah. So now you are just converting the integer value and then storing it into another variable that is B. And the original value is still the same. So this is how you can do it according to the requirements. Now let's move forward. So now let's convert the integer value to float value. So let me take a variable C and it is holding some integer value. Let's take 10. So yeah. Now if you want to convert this value into float value, then you can use the float function and then give the variable name. And you can see that it is converted into float value. And if you see the original value of C, it is still the same. And if you want to reassign or store that value into some another variable, then you can do it in the similar way we did in the previous case. Now, let's take another case when integer values or float values are stored as strings. So let's take another variable, let's say x. And now let's take any integer value and store them as a string. So yes, you can see this is the integer value, but it is stored as a string. So suppose if you want to convert this value into integer, then use the integer function and give the variable name. And yeah, it is converted into integer. It is working fine. Now let's take another variable y and let me store some float value into it. So yeah, this is the float value stored as string. Now, if you want to convert this value, yeah, it is converted into float value. So these are working fine. Now, suppose if you want to convert this value into string integer value, let's see if it works or not. So now, so it is not working. It means if you are having the float value stored as string, you cannot directly convert it into the integer. So let's see how to do it. But before that, let's write here first. So if you are having the pure integers saved as string, it can be converted into integer. So these are working fine. Let me copy it. And in this case also, if it is a float value, can also be converted into float. It is also working fine. But if it is a float value stored as string, it cannot be directly converted into integer. So let's see how to do it. So let me take this. So yeah, now if you want to convert this value into integer, then first you have to convert this value into float and then convert this value into integer. So yeah, it is working fine now. So we have seen that we can directly convert the float value into integer value. So we can apply the same rule here that first you have to convert this float value stored as string and then you have to convert it into integer. So let me write it as float value which is stored as a string can't be directly converted into integer. So if you want to convert it, so first you need to convert it into float and then to integer. So this is how you can convert the float value stored as string into integer. So this is a very important rule and it helps you when you are working with the real world problems. So you can get the mixed data and you have to rectify that. Now let's understand some more important rules. Let's see another way to define a variable. So one way is the simplest way. Then you can have the variable name equal to value. But now let's see another way. Suppose you are having variable A, B, and C. Let's take three variables. And you can also define it in a single line. So, and let's take any string value, that is Ram. And you can also take any float value, that is this one. And just run it. And if you see the value of A, it is 34. And value of B is RAM. And C is 87.98. So, in this case, it's act like a placeholder. Means your first variable will get the first value, second variable will get the second value, and the third variable will get the third value. But you have to remember, like if you are giving more number of variables and less values, it will throw an error. So let me write it as, let's define some variable as A1, A2, A3, and let's take four variables and less values. Suppose you are giving only three values. So yeah, it will give you value error. It means not enough values to unpack. It is expecting four values as you are defining four variable here, but it is getting only three values. So you have to remember, if you are defining the variable in a single line, then you must take care of the number of variables as well as number of values. So this is an important rule. Now, let's learn the new topic, or let me write a new rule. So we have discussed about the print function. So you can write anything inside this print function and it will be shown as the output. Now you are having different syntaxes for writing the print syntax. So let me write it as, you are having three syntaxes. So first one is your comma separated. Second one is, let me wait, F string, and the third one is your dot format. So these are the three ways to write the print statement. So let's discuss one by one. Suppose you are having some variable as, you have to write some statement as like the loan amount is something and stored in a variable, and the interest rate is something stored in a variable. So let me. So how to make it dynamic? Let's see. Let's take two variables. One is your loan amount, and let's assign some value to it. Let's take 4 lakhs, or maybe and interest rate. Let's give it any value. Let me 7.84. And we are having these two variables. And suppose we want to make this dynamic, then how to do it? So first is your comma separated. So let me write one by one. So you have to print this statement with the help of this method. So let me write it as print. And inside this, you have to write the static part inside single quotes. So the loan amount is, and you have to write the, so the loan amount is present in this variable. So you have to write the variable name, and you have to separate it with the help of comma. And again, you have to put the comma, and then this is your static part again. So you have to write it inside the quotes, and interest rate is. So this is stored in this variable. So separated with the help of comma, and just run this cell. So you can see that the loan amount is this one and the interest rate is this. Or just remove this space. Because by default, it will take the space after comma. So yeah, in this way, you can write the print statement with the help of comma separated. Now, one thing you need to remember is that in this type of method, you have to write the static part inside quotes, and the dynamic part without quotes. And you have to write them with the help of comma separated values. Now let's check the second method, that is f string. So in this method, let's write. You have to write f, and inside the single quotes, you have to write everything inside this quote, static part as well as dynamic part. So let's start writing it. Loan amount is, and instead of comma, you have to write the curly braces. And inside that curly braces, you have to write the variable name. So the variable name is loan amount, and interest rate is, and again, you need to give the variable name. So you have to write it inside the curly braces. So curly braces, and you have to write the variable name. So you need to remember in the f string method, you have to write everything, static part as well as dynamic part inside the quotes and variables inside this curly braces. Now let's run this cell, and yes, same output. So let's see the third method, that is dot format. So let's see the next method, that is dot format. So in this method, you have to write everything inside the single quotes. So let me write it as the loan amount is, and instead of variable name, you have to give the curly braces, blank curly braces, and then interest rate is, you have to again put the curly braces for the value, and then end with the help of single quotes, and you have to write dot format. Now you have to give the value in the chronological order. So first value is your loan amount. So you have to give the first variable name, and then interest rate is stored in the this variable. So you have to give the second variable name, and then run this cell. So the same output, but the drawback for this method is, let me show you. If by mistake, instead of this, you have changed the order of the variables. So let me write the interest rate first. And run this cell. So now you can see that the loan amount is, it has been swapped. So you have to maintain the order of the variables. So this is the drawback of that. So you need to be very careful. Suppose you are having 50 variables in a single statement, then you have to be very careful. And this is the very preferred method, F string, because you will know which variable you are using. So you have to just write it in the correct place. So you can use any of them as per your convenience. So, but this is the drawback that you have to take care of the order. So let me delete this. Now let's talk about some predefined functions. So we are having many predefined functions in Python. So we have discussed till now, that is print. We have discussed about the print function. We have also discussed about the type function. And let me talk about some more functions. So let's learn about one more important function, that is input function. So the input function, it will wait for the input from the users. Suppose you are going to ATM. So to withdraw the money, so a message will appear on the screen that enter the amount to be withdrawn. So how it works, let's see. Input, you have to, so this is a function, so you have to write the parenthesis. Now in single quotes, you have to write the message to be displayed on the screen. Suppose you are writing enter the number. And if you run it, this message will be displayed on the screen and it will wait for the number to be entered by the user. So let me run it. So yeah, you can see that whatever you will write inside this code, it will display the message on the screen and it will wait for a value. So let's take this value 7 and enter. So yeah, you can see that even you are giving the value as integer, it will take the value as string. It means output of input function is always a string and it is a temporary output because you are not storing it anywhere. So let me write it as output of input function is always string. Now suppose if you want this value stored somewhere, so you can write it as input, enter any number, and you need to be very careful. Suppose you want any number, integer, enter any integer number, and you want to store it as an integer, then you can just convert it into integer like we did in the previous examples. Let's run it. Now this is asking for any integer, enter. You can see that in the previous case it is taking the input as the string, but now it is taking the input as a string, but it will showing you the output after converting it into the integer. This is how we can manage the output to be shown. And suppose if we want to hold it into memory, or we can take any variable. So we can create a variable 1, suppose, and run it. So yeah, it is not showing you because you are storing it. You are not saying anything to display on the screen. And if you see the num1, you can see that it is holding this variable 8. So now this is not temporary anymore. So this is your permanent. Means it is storing this value. Or you can do also one thing, that write it here. So now if you write any variable name, it is storing this value as well as showing this value. So this is how you can manage. And suppose you want to give any float value, like, let me write it as input. And so you have to be very clear with this message, because this is how the user will enter something. So let me write it as, suppose you are saying enter the interest rate. So logically, the interest rate is generally in decimal places. So the user may enter the values for decimal places. Now you can convert it into float. Just run the cell, and you are saying that enter the interest rate, and suppose someone is entering this value. So yeah, it is converting into float value and then reflecting. So it is a very important function. Now let's learn about one more predefined function, that is your round function. So this function will help you to round the values up to any decimal places, like the, so let me write it as round. And suppose if you want to see the functionality of any function, then you have to place the cursor here and just press Shift Tab. Then you can see the functionality. So this is the doc string, which will show you the definition of that particular function. So this will say round a number to a given precision in the decimal digits. So it will take two arguments. First of all, you have to give the number and number of digits to be rounded off. So let me write any number. So this is your decimal place number, and suppose you want to round the decimal places up to 2 digit. Just run this cell. Now you can see that this value has been rounded off to the 2 decimal places. So this is how you can use the functions. And so let's see if it works. So yeah, if you want to see the functionality of input function, then just place the cursor here and press Shift Tab, and yes, you can see the functionality of any function in that. So in the doc string, you will get the definition of the functions. So that's it for today. I hope you like this video. If you like this video, please do like, share, and subscribe to Code Query Hub. And thanks for watching.